Welcome to another episode of National Divorce Talk Raw. We have some big stories for you. One, federal government under Joe Biden continues to screw over Californians on wages and disaster assistance, but that really shouldn't surprise you. The federal government, despite what you think, has been horrible at providing for disaster assistance for Californians over the last 40 years. We'll show you how the California government has had to deal with the federal government not supporting them when it comes to disasters, going all the way back to President Clinton. And we will tell you how President Biden is continuing that American trend. Also, we're going to show you how the debate over Roe v. Wade is heating up. More people than ever before are using the phrase tyranny of the minority, meaning that they see that the American Constitution allows a minority of states to block laws that progressives want, even if the majority wants those laws. So we'll show you how the media and mainstream America is finally starting to clock in on something that we have told you is a problem at least for 45 years. But first, please take a look at this. Well, in 2018, we in the Cal-Exit movement had pointed out that American democracy no longer works because of the Constitution itself. Namely, the Constitution puts rights in the hands of states and not people. We're a representative democracy and not a pure democracy. What that means is that you can have a majority of the people want someone for president, but if a majority of the states and their electoral college votes want someone else, that person gets to be president, not who the people wanted. That happened with Donald Trump, and it happened with George W. Bush. This has happened twice in American history in recent times. Additionally, the Senate gives 2 seats per state. That means that places like California only get 2 senators when they're 25% of the economy, and places like Wyoming get same representation in the Senate as California. Additionally, the Supreme Court is able to have justices on that bench because the president, who can be unpopularly elected, can suggest judges who are confirmed by a Senate who has a tiny minority of the population. Tyranny of the minority. We brought you this up in 2018, and we showed you how other people were talking about this last year. Let me show you how we said it, and then let me show you how people are starting to clue in on this issue now, and that's what's significant. We had been talking about how America doesn't work and California is going to be disenfranchised, not be able to have the laws that it wants, and the laws that it's used to are going to be struck down because the majority of states are conservative, don't like California, and actually control the federal government and will continue to increasingly control the federal government all the way up to the year 2040. At least that's what demographer Norman Ornstein says, and we've covered that here. Let me show you a little bit more. This is the article by 2040, Democracy in America Will Be Dead. Every year, the conservative rural interior of America will have more power, and the areas of America where the population lives will have less power. By 2040, the Senate will probably not represent the American people to a shocking degree. American presidents like Trump, who are super extreme compared to the average American, will become the norm. Extremists who have opinions out of touch with America will routinely be appointed to the Supreme Court. You're already seeing that now with the Supreme Court. You're already seeing extremists who are not the norm being elevated to president, George W. Bush and Donald Trump. And it's because of this. Norman Ornstein pointed this out first. I want to repeat a statistic I use in every talk. By 2040 or so, 70% of Americans will live in 15 states, meaning 30% of the population will choose 70 senators, and the 30% will be older, whiter, and more rural and more male than the 70%. So 15 states are going to have 70% of the population, and 35 states, a clear dominant majority, who will own the Electoral College and own the Senate and therefore own the Supreme Court. Well, those 35 states will only have 30% of the population, and they'll be in charge. Ornstein is not by himself. Here's a very liberal newspaper, the Washington Post, completely agreeing with him, by the way. 20 years, half the population will live in state by Philip Bump. And then also a very conservative magazine, Norman Ornstein. Well, that's the actual statistic, but anyways, this is roughly what they're getting at. The blue dots represent the large population. The gray dots represent the small population. As you can see, there's about 35 states with gray dots. Those gray dots will be running things. And the blue dots, which represent a minority states, even though they're a majority of the population, will not. 30% of the population of the country will control 68% of the seats in the Senate. More starkly, half the population of the country will control 84% of those seats. Here's Think Progress. That's another liberal magazine saying the same thing. Here's Republicans also admitting the same thing. Anyways, that's the point, is that when you have 35 states, they're the majority. Because of the Electoral College, they have outsized influence already. When you have a dominant majority of the states, you can elect every president, and he will not be popularly elected. So you're going to start seeing presidents that only have 30% of the population like them, not even close to 50%, but they're still president because of the Electoral College. We've already seen something like that with Bush and Trump. Additionally, you're going to still have the Senate go even more hardcore conservative to a level you've never seen, because it's going to be dominated, 2/3 of it by those 35 states. When you have the Senate in control and the president in control, you can pick any Supreme Court justice you want and have them confirmed, which is now all three branches: the executive, the president, the judicial, the Supreme Court, and the legislative, the Senate, all being dominated by extremists from 35 states. That's what we're seeing. We've brought this to you since 2018. And what's interesting for you as a CalExit supporter or somebody who just follows the idea of national division is that everybody seems to be picking it up now. We said this years ago, barely anyone talked about it, and now everybody, because of Roe v. Wade, is finally cluing in on what we identified 4 years ago, that America's broken and that it doesn't work and it's not a democracy because of the Constitution, which means you would have to radically reform the Constitution or blow it apart in order to fix this problem. That's never going to happen. There's never going to be a constitutional convention. They're never going to blow apart the Constitution and rewrite the whole thing, which means secession is your more likely answer out of the situation. Because the other one is a constitutional convention where somehow you don't lose all your rights and they enshrine gun control for babies at 6 months as a constitutional right. I mean, that's the thing that can happen. So let me show you how something we have been pointing out, the Constitution is broken. That means American democracy is broken. It cannot be fixed unless you rewrite the entire Constitution, which will never happen, which makes secession a more reasonable alternative for many. Here you go. Let me show you now. So this is what we said in 2018. 4 years ago, we were pointing this out, the demographics, tyranny of the minority, which is mostly focused around this statistic. Now I want to show you this. So if you type in tyranny of the minority, Roe v. Wade, here's what happens. May 3rd, minority rule is the real reason, right there. Tyranny of the minority. A radical minority, The Guardian. So you're already seeing Washington Post, government, foreign media. Salon is also foreign media. That's French foreign media. It's tyranny of the minority. So the French are recognizing this. The English are recognizing this. Here's another English newspaper. Roe v. Wade, tyranny of the minority, from the New York Times. Vice News talks about tyranny of the minority. The Cut, tyranny of the minority. Oh, that's from 2019. Angry minority taking legitimate but detestable advantage of skewed political system. All Haaretz. So Haaretz is, I believe, Israeli news. Salon is French news. The Guardian is English news. And so you have major publications like Washington Post, English newspapers, French newspapers, the New York Times again, Vice News, The Cut, and Israeli news, all recognizing that tyranny of the minority regarding Roe v. Wade is now a problem. They're all getting it this week when we said it 4 years ago. Now everybody, including the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Guardian, Salon, and Haaretz are getting it. Here you go. Here's that Guardian article. They're finally, this is from last year. So they did mention it, but they're mentioning it again this year. So that's increasing coverage. A minority of Americans in both 2016 and 2020 are about to get what they want. An America in which women and girls are forced into pregnancy, childbirth, and motherhood. An America in which women have second-class citizens, not entitled to control over the very bodies they live in and forced to live their lives in the name of pro-life misogyny. The rest of us are stuck dealing with these minority religious and views imposed on us. That's what they're talking about, is that you could have a minority in America who has really extreme views on women, and because they represent 35 states, a majority of the population is going to have to do what a minority of the population says. So majority of the population is going to have to follow the rules of a bunch of extremists who represent a minority of the population. The Guardian was getting that last year. Again, we pointed that out 3 years before them. Washington Post, here you go. Minority rule is the real reason Roe v. Wade is dead. Vice News. Okay. I don't know why it's doing it. A broken democratic process led us to the Roe v. Wade earthquake. Broken democratic process. That's the Constitution not working. Tyranny of the minority. There it is. Vice News came out recently. Here's Mother Jones, another liberal magazine, reverses. It's all about minority rule. And finally, here we go on Christine Amanpour reports. I believe that's on PBS, but she originally came from CNN. Here you go. This is what they're saying.
So wrote this week, quote, America's gun-free for all is a symptom of the takeover of our nation by a radical extremist minority. Richardson has built a huge following with her missives entitled Letters from an American. Here she is speaking to Michelle Martin about American democracy and the failure to tackle gun control.
Thanks, Christiane. Heather Cox Richardson, thank you so much for talking with us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
How did we get here? It is a fact, is it not, that a majority of Americans favor some form of gun safety regulations, correct?
Oh, yes.
So given that a majority, an overwhelming majority of Americans favor these kinds of things, how did we get to the point where a minority of the population, including a gun-owning minority, so controls the policy here, the policies under which we all live? So take us back to the beginning. I mean, obviously the National Rifle Association is central to that, which was founded, in the 19th century? Did they always have this uncompromising position toward regulation of firearms?
No, they didn't. And that's part of the really interesting story of how we got to this moment. The NRA actually starts in 1871, and it starts as an opportunity for people who fought in the Civil War, men who fought in the Civil War, to continue their firearm skills and the camaraderie of being in camp together, doing things like having shooting games at tin cans, for example. At the same time, there was the rise as well of sport of shooting, especially in Europe, for which there were pretty large prizes, and socialist government. That whole language is not new. And that image of the gun-toting cowboy takes its shape from people like Barry Goldwater, who wrote. Think about things like the fact that in 1977, the blockbuster image was that of Luke Skywalker, who is this individual guy taking on the Empire. And a lot of Americans envisioned themselves as that in that period. And that's the moment that the NRA changes from being about gun safety and about protecting the sport of shooting, which is still a big sport in America, and becomes about what they call gun rights, the right of the individual to act as he almost always wishes.
So how did it get to be that the level of violence that we are now experiencing in communities across the country, that this kind of violence, especially mass violence, has become so prevalent, and yet the political system seems completely unable to deal with it? How did that happen?
It's crazy. It's worth it. I will answer that, but it's really worth sitting for a moment with the idea that we are literally a country in which our children, our elderly, our churchgoers are gunned down, and our system says this is the way, this is the price of freedom, as Bill O'Reilly once put it. So the question of to answer the question that you just asked of how we got to a place where the government seems unable to handle the fact that 90% of us want common sense gun regulations, and at the same time we have legislators saying, you know, this is not the time to talk about gun safety regulations, again, is about politics. So beginning in 1986, we get the Republican Party beginning to talk about voter suppression. They call it ballot integrity at the time, but there are private memos saying that they're expecting to throw Black people off the rolls. We get opposition to the Motor Voter Act of 1993, which enables people to enroll in voting at motor vehicle registration places and welfare offices, for example. And we increasingly get to focus on voter suppression and making sure that only certain people get to have.
Well, I won't bore you with the rest, but basically they get into talking about tyranny of the minority. She starts talking about how Republicans have an overwhelming dominance in the Senate and over influence in the House, given their percentage of the population, how they've had 2 unpopular elected presidents and how that allows them to control the Supreme Court. So the point is that everybody's finally waking up to something we've been saying for years. Tyranny of the minority is baked into the Constitution, and Californians, you're going to have all your rights and laws taken away from you, and there's nothing you can do about it until you wait to the year 2045 when demographics actually start shifting America to start acting like us. So, do you want to subject your children to 2 more decades of this, or would you like to make a break and have a government where you could actually secure your gun rights and your abortion rights and your environmental rights? And you never actually have to worry about what crazy person America elects and what crazy judges are going to be appointed to the bench next. Up to you. Okay, here's our next story. Federal government continues under Joe Biden to screw over Californians on wages and disaster assistance. Let's show you the new developments, and they're going to walk you through what the historical narrative for this is. Okay. So Trump's judges are coming for California gun laws. Can we stop them? In the LA Times came out very recently. The front page of law also brought back one. Worse. The greatest threat to controlling guns in the Golden State is extremist judges, Newsom worried, even as he promised to sign a new gun laws if the legislature passed them. Without a doubt, some of those will end up challenged in court in front of those federal society judges, many appointed by Trump, who are intent on pulling the U.S. as far right as possible. Newsom particularly name-checked a Trump appointed Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals Judge Ryan D. Nelson, who wrote a recent 2-1 decision that found unconstitutional California's ban on allowing anyone under the age of 21 to have an assault weapon. So finally, the governor is starting to recognize that California can pass any laws that it wants. They'll be struck down at the federal level by judges appointed by Trump. And as America becomes more conservative and conservatives have more power up to the year 2040, 2045, there will continue to be more conservative judges and more rulings striking down California laws. This is happening under Biden. And remember, the Democrats won control of the House and Biden won. And the Republicans did not have control of the Senate. So the Democrats are very strong. The Republicans don't have control of the Senate. The Dems do have control of the House and the presidency, and they have a fighting chance in the Senate, and they still can't stop the rollback of gun laws from California. So Californians, please don't do this thing every election season where you go, well, we'll just elect a new people and they'll get in and switch that. Based on what? The Democrats have been in charge for 2 years. The Republicans don't have control of the Senate. The Democrats do have control of the House. The Democrats do have control of the presidency. America is turned against most of these Trump narrative. And you can't protect California's gun laws or fix this problem at all. So why vote, California? Why believe in the federal system when the Democrats, even when they're in control, and the Republicans aren't, can't guarantee protection for your loss. You saw it here. Okay, moving on. Now, this is our last hope. Caldor fire survivors make plea to President Biden for federal aid, KCRA, May 24th. What happened was the federal government did not come through with assistance for wildfire survivors. Now, the wildfires happen on federal land. And additionally, California is a donor state, meaning it pays more into the system than it gets out. And yet, the federal government can't take care of California citizens, even though we pay more into the federal system than we get out. And even though those people are literally on federal land, the federal government can't take care of its own people. The efforts follow multiple denials from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, El Dorado, to provide assistance to the people in El Dorado County who lost their homes and businesses. So there are people in El Dorado County. There was a massive forest fire. They still have not been made whole by FEMA. FEMA's supposed to come in and make everybody whole and fix everything. It's a year later, and Californians are going, my home, my business was burned down on federal land. You're the federal government. Can you help me out? No. Hey, my state's a donor state. You kind of should help us out in a really serious manner. No. In a letter to Governor Newsom on October 1st, 2021, FEMA denied the state's request for individual assistance. And this event was not of severity and magnitude to warrant help. That's what FEMA said. Let's take a look at how not damaged that place was.
This is how Don Bishop is storing his drinking water as his town works to rebuild.
Well, this one holds roughly 300 gallons.
A friend donating this huge tank, normally used for wine.
We were driving down the hill pretty much daily or every other day.
In Grizzly Flats. Finally, this week, the water is not safe to drink water.
We're working our
Services District, which treats and provides water for the town, and escaped the Jody's team's town.
So they still don't even have water working right. It's still burned out. There you go.
Treated water in town. The other two tanks have burned down. It's heartbreaking, and I feel so.
So right there, what you're saying.
Community.
On Monday, Jody.
I'll show you that again.
It's heartbreaking, and I
So everything's
feel
burned
so
down to
much.
rubble. Okay. And the federal government.
On Monday, Jody, a single mom.
This event was
saw
not
what was
such
left of her
severity
home. This
and
is what it
magnitude
was
to warrant.
before. The Caldor fire.
Thanks. I'll be there in 2 minutes. So, I got to go. But as you can see, you just saw the devastation, and FEMA said this event was not of such severity and magnitude to warrant help. So the federal government turned them down again. And if that's not enough, here's the federal government again saying, you know what the problem in America is? And this is under Biden. Wages are too high. According to a transcript of the presser published by the Wall Street Journal, Powell blamed this inflation crisis, which is global, not on the proxy war in Ukraine or Western sanctions in Russia, or even Joe Biden's inept handling, but rather on U.S. workers supposedly making too much money. Wages are rising at the fastest pace in many years. So people in California and America have been begging Joe Biden for a minimum wage increase. Wages are actually going up, and the federal government says that's a problem that wages are going up. We need to suppress wages. So if we need to bail out businesses for COVID-19, they get it. And if we need to bail out banks for an economic recession that they caused in 2008, they get it. But if you're a homeowner and you want assistance for losing your home, you'll get nothing. And if you're a worker and you've been begging the federal government and the president said he would guarantee minimum wage and then backs away, they're coming to take away your living wages because you having good wages is a problem for the federal government under Joe Biden. But that's not all. I got to show you this real quick. This isn't the first time this happened. Oh, oops. Okay. Give me 1 second to figure out what's going on. Why is that doing that? Okay. Okay. Here you go. So in 1985, the federal government cut off California from oil money. We had the Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989, waiting 2 years, some 4 years to get the money to rebuild buildings not opened by the federal government. The federal government didn't want to fix the cracks. California wanted to fix the buildings so they did not crumble in the next earthquake. Hundreds of millions of dollars held up by the federal government for that earthquake. The next governor said we had to raise taxes to pay for fixing that earthquake because the federal government wouldn't do it. The 1992 recession, California asked for a bailout. They were denied by Bill Clinton. The Northridge earthquake, FEMA did a horrible job taking care of the disabled in California, basically left them there to rot. Even then, with that earthquake, California didn't get the level of assistance we deserved, and we had to raise money on ourselves. And that's after, Californians are playing for flood waters in the Midwest, hurricanes in the East Coast, and now we need help and we don't get anything. They were talking about it back then. Here's the 2000 electricity massacre. So we had blackouts and brownouts in California in 2000. The federal government provided zero help. And it turned out that we were price gouged by Texas, who was protected by the federal government, allowing us to be price gouged. The dot-com bubble also burst in 2000. So we went through another recession in 2000 after the one in 92 because the Federal Reserve, set by the federal government, changed the way the financial market worked, which caused a recession here, but boosted the American economy. So the Federal Reserve chose America over us, made some adjustments to how they ran the reserve, and that caused an automatic recession here while helping America. Nobody cared, and then we got absolutely no help getting out of that crisis in 2000. So also after the 9/11 attack, we were the most vulnerable to a terrorist attack because of our multiple seaports and airports. It took us 5 years to get 9/11 security money so that we could put nuclear radiation detectors in the ports, air and sea, so they wouldn't die. And many people had to say, hey, America, you're saying the terrorist attack is the biggest thing. How come you're holding up our 9/11 security money, allowing us to be blown up by terrorists for 5 years? 2006, it's revealed FEMA has absolutely no plans for what to do in an earthquake in California. And they've been sitting on that for 12 years. They had the one in Loma Prieta and they never made it better. So in 2006, FEMA said they're worthless. 2008, California had forest fires. The federal government gave almost no assistance, and we had the forest fires burned down. 2009, we had a recession. We went to Obama asking for help. We were denied. 2016, the federal government doesn't help California deal with another forest fire. 238 families left homeless. So as you can see, this isn't an anomaly. We had a recession under Clinton. We had a recession under Obama. We were a donor state and we got absolutely no help. We had an earthquake under Clinton, and we had an earthquake earlier, and they couldn't give us the money to build back. And so we had to fix that ourselves. We had a 9/11 terrorist attack in New York, and the Department of Homeland Security, Michael Chertoff, said California is the most susceptible to terrorist attack. And it took us 5 years to be able to get the money to put nuclear radiation detectors so we didn't get blown up. The Federal Reserve changed the interest rates and we caused an automatic recession, and then we weren't helped out with that with the dot-com bubble. The federal government protected a foreign Texas from price gouging us so that we could all go into blackouts over summer. I lived through that. It was horrible. And then, so what emergency did we have, financial or natural disaster or power or drought, where we get anything? I forgot to mention that we had the drought emergency. Obama came down here and did absolutely nothing about it. So tell me what disaster we get where the feds actually come through. Because Biden not coming through for wildfire disaster victims here in California is kind of par for the course. It's the norm going back decades, and yet Californians have never looked at this. And whenever we talk about CalExit, they go, well, you can't CalExit. America's our disaster assistance. Really? Because they've done nothing for 3 decades. That's why we rely on them and pay more as a donor state. Something to think about. We'll catch you later. Hope you enjoy the show.